Now, Donald Trump has forged ahead with military deportation flights, sending another plane load of migrants to Guatemala. Now, that a day after coming to the brink of a trade war with Colombia, after its president initially refused to let US military aircraft land there. Colombia now saying it has sent two Colombian Air Force planes to the US to pick up migrants that Trump tried to deport. Colombia calling it a win-win situation, although those comments do cast doubt on White House assertions that the country had relented to Trump's demands to accept US military flights. And all that as Donald Trump's promised mass deportations began, of course, back on Sunday. 956 people seized then, with a number of cities in particular targeted, such as Chicago, Newark and Miami. Trump says he will carry out the biggest deportation in history. We're going to talk more about it with Oliver Farry, who joins us now from our international affairs desk. Oliver, what was significant then about these deportations at the weekend? Was it an escalation by the new administration?
Well, it was an escalation week on week, with daily deportations going from about 350 per day to 956 on Sunday. Whether it's an escalation long term, it's too soon to say, but there was definitely a political dimension to the locations chosen. Many of them were, like Los Angeles, Chicago and Newark, are sanctuary cities, which are effectively cities where the local municipalities have limited cooperation with federal authorities with regard to migration enforcement. Now, these cities are invariably run by Democratic administrations. Chicago was the epicenter. Donald Trump probably chose it because it's the hometown of Barack Obama, and no American politician gets up Trump's nose as much as Obama. Remember, of course, that Trump first came to political prominence under the Obama administration by claiming that the then president was not an American-born citizen and was ineligible to be president. Now, the American Immigration Council estimates that there are 11 to 13 million undocumented migrants in the US. Trump has vowed to deport millions of them, calling them criminals. In reality, there's only about 655,000 on ICE's docket who have a criminal conviction or a pending charge. Many of those are actually deported immediately upon their exit from prison. Now, a raft of executive orders signed last week have targeted undocumented migrants, but this is the first sign of the policy being put into practice. There's going to be wide-scale deportations regardless. They happen under every presidency, Democratic ones as well as Republicans. Barack Obama carried 2.9 million deportations in his first term in office. Joe Biden, 1.5 million. Both of those, incidentally, were higher than Trump's first term in office. However, Biden's figures were largely of people just immediately sent back upon entering the country at the border, mainly under Title 42 emergency pandemic measures. But many of those expelled repeatedly attempted to cross. What's different with Trump is that he wants to broaden the scope of deportations to the interior of the country, and he wants to hit much higher figures.
Yeah, as you say, he's going to deport millions and millions of what he calls criminal aliens. Is deporting a large percentage of undocumented migrants really realistic, though?
Probably not, but you can probably still deport quite a few. It's a massive task, and no matter which way you slice it, it would come at a huge cost. A report by the American Immigration Council says that if you were to theoretically deport those 11 to 13 million undocumented migrants, it would take 10 years and it would cost at least 1.1 trillion US dollars, resulting in a loss of 4.2% to 6.8% of annual GDP. That would dwarf the hit that the economy took during the pandemic. Many sectors of the US economy that rely heavily on migrant labour would collapse overnight. They include restaurants, which has already been suffering from a labour shortage since the pandemic, meatpacking, construction, agriculture, etc. There will also be a raft of legal challenges. We've already seen it last week with 22 states filing lawsuits against Trump's attempt to end birthright citizenship. They say quite rightly that it is unconstitutional. And will the Trump administration accomplish all this? Probably not, but they can still do an awful lot of damage. And also an important thing really is that Donald Trump is a salesman more than anything else. He's a mediocre businessman, but he's very, very good at selling things. He likes to make a promise and worry about delivering it later. It's the same thing in politics as in business. He's very, very good at campaigning, not so great at governing. This translates, of course, in politics. Trump is not overly concerned about following through. It probably doesn't really matter whether he hits those numbers that he's promising. It's the very, very fact that he, if he's actually, the rhetoric will drown out the actual facts. Most of his voters are not very detail oriented. They will only really care about the anti-migrant rhetoric. That said, he can still do a lot of damage. Families stand to be torn apart. There were children separated from their families during the first Trump administration. And these broad dragnets given to ICE, the Immigration Enforcement Agency, can probably also catch a lot of migrants with legal status in them as well. So it's very, very vague. It's very, very diffuse. And also the fact is that these ultimately will be looking at quotas to hit. And also there's the climate of fear that will hit non-documentary migrants in the US and also perhaps deter those who are trying to get there. That's probably the point for Donald Trump.
Oliver, thanks very much. Oliver Farry from my International Affairs Desk there.